Hey, hello there. How are you? How are you today? So let's get straight to the point, right, of this video. Recently, I guess since yesterday, there has been some talks about something called EUOS. So what is EUS? Well, it's a concept, right? It is a concept, and it's not actually directly affiliated with the EU. And I'm going to explain this properly, but don't get it wrong immediately. So what is EOS? Basically, this is Linux, and this is an attempt, uh, somewhat, of one person who wants to do some good. And I actually very much like what he's doing. So let me go ahead and switch directly to some content, right? And then I'm going to explain it a little bit more. So if you go to Mastodon eupolicy.social, you will see that there is an account called EUOS. This is a community-led proof of concept for a free operating system for the EU public sector, account operated by Mr. Robert here. And first of all, let's go ahead and click on the title of this Mastodon instance to get a better idea what is going on here. So we have something that resembles an EU flag in a little bit of a different manner. The title of this instance is telling us that this might be related to EU. And EU policy.social is a privately run Mastodon server for people working in areas that are at least loosely related to EU policy. We provide EU policy.social on a voluntarily basis. Our team of admins and moderators currently consists of a couple of these good guys over here. So the key word here is that this is a private Mastodon instance. Okay, so what this private Mastodon instance has, they have a link to their GitLab, they have a link to their matrix room, well, the star of the day is basically Brody, but nevertheless, you're going to watch Brody's video on your own. But what is important here is the response that this account called EUOS has given us on account of Brody's video, right? So they say that Brody's channel covered this on his YouTube. Thanks for putting us in the spotlight. Here's a link to the video, and for some comment ahead of a possible appearance in his show, there are a couple of points worth discussing, right? So number one, we are indeed in a concept phase, and who is we? We're going to get to that. Join us here on Matrix at eu:/kd.org or at our GitLab if you would like to contribute. So the elephant in the room immediately is that they are kind of pitching Fedora as the base operating system on top of which they are going to build something, and we are going to get to that as well. And immediately a lot of people have a huge question mark on their head, right? So why Fedora, right? Why not something that comes from the actual EU, right? Such as OpenSUSE. And whatever you think of Fedora and OpenSUSE and anything else in between, people have already spoken about it, and it doesn't really matter which operating system is it, because they don't plan to develop their own. And by they, I am going to get to this in a second, who they are. And what they want to do is they want to make it a viable product for the, public sector, right? So whether it's Fedora or Alma or anything else, it doesn't quite matter at this point because they didn't really hard decided on which distribution they want to use. What they want to do is build on top of a certain distribution, and they might as well change the distribution later on if the whole thing gets any traction, right? So at this point, this project doesn't really exist on the level of the EU, right? It's like I wouldn't compare it to let's say if I would start a project like this. This wouldn't be far from the truth what is going on right now because Mr. Robert is in charge of this entire project at the moment, and he does have a lot more connections to the EU than I do, right? So it's not fair from me to say that this is same level of development, but it is a fact that at this moment he's somewhat on his own, right? And he needs a lot of help to pitch this as a good idea onwards. And it is a good moment to dive in and, well, help him out, right? Make a little bit of a community around this project and contribute with something meaningful and help to shape it into how you would like to see it end up, right, in the end, because this is just getting started and none of it is really set in stone. So right here I have switched to his profile, right? PhD in computer science and some other stuff that he deems important for his bio. But what is important is his link at Social Network Europa EU website. This is the official EU website. And he cares about the EU topics, GDPR, privacy, Linux, KDE, Matrix, OpenStreetMap, and OSM, right? You can read on his blog some other stuff. And what is important on this profile to read, right? The EDPS, let me just switch here, European Data Protection Supervisor, right? Appointed me to head the sector digital transformation. I now take care of coordinating the IT team of the EDPS, managing the procurement of the IT services for the EDPS, managing the implementation of new IT projects, coordinating with other organizations to develop common approaches and ensured interoperability, developing and maintaining the EDPS IT inspections lab, advising senior management on technical issues, right? So as you can see, this person is not entirely irrelevant, like, for example, I would be if I started such a project, right? But nevertheless, this still isn't an official EU project. All of these EU projects kind of start really small as a concept, and there needs to be some meat if this is even going to become a thing, right? So if you got the attention, if you got the idea from Brody's video that this is a new EU operating system, then you got it completely wrong. You may have got it right if you look forward into a crystal ball like 5 years from now. But in order for this to gain some meaningful traction, I think this needs a lot of help from the community, right? At least a lot of feedback and a lot of technical expertise. And why am I saying this? I'm going to read something that Robert wrote, right? So I don't think it is really important to read the EDPS website at this point. You can go and check it yourself. There is a GitLab project regarding the EU OS. Let me just go back to the beginning. Community-led proof of concept for a free operating system for the EU public sector, right? So you can dig into their GitLab as much as you like. I'm not going to go deeper into this topic because, as I said, they are only just getting started at this point, right? So let's go ahead and switch to their matrix chat. So in their matrix room, there has already been a ton of questions, and most of them rely and focused mostly at the why Fedora, why not Debian, why not Ubuntu, why not I don't know the OpenSUSE, right? And all these questions are seemingly not that relevant at this phase. So let me read what Mr. Roberts said as consolidated answer to all of these running questions, right? They feel like burning questions, but apparently they aren't as burning as it seems on the surface, right? So Mr. Roberts says, Dears, I understand that you're all passionate about the Linux distribution choice. However, these comments are very little helpful for the ambition of the EU operating system. Picking a Linux distribution does not matter so much. I can't really pronounce the name of this company. A project called Linux Plus One distributed some OpenSUSE Leap computers for a pilot and says that they still need to choose a Linux distribution. It means to me that they believe even in a late stage of the pilot, they have this flexibility to change the distribution. The proposition of EU operating system currently is to rely on layering to build immutable OS images. It will be this way quite easy to change the first line in some Docker file, container file, or recipe.yaml. Look here. So I have already clicked on this link and it leads here, right? And this is like an example YAML file, recipe.yaml. And basically what this does is it installs a generic distribution. In this case, it may be a distribution or that one or the other one, it doesn't really matter. And this is just a recipe that says like install btop, yakuake, podman compose, and then remove Firefox because they're going to add like a Flatpak package. Like this is just an example. Don't get this too serious as a final plan or anything like that. This is an example on how they have envisioned building on top of a current distribution. So imagine, for example, a Nobara project, right? Everyone seems to be having an idea that this is an actual distribution. And from a certain point, you might as well be correct on that, but it is closer to this recipe than you might think it is, right? Because Nobara is basically building on top of the existing Fedora, right? They customize it to their needs and to your needs if you're a gamer or content creator or something along those lines. So in similar ways, this guy and his entire team and you, should you choose to join the project and help out, this is how they have envisioned starting up the project, right? So far, Fedora community is most advanced with this. Someone made it work with Arch, and people like to see Debian support. Please help with this issue if you want to broaden the scope of possible distributions. And there is a link to something that you can read about to get a better idea on how you can help, right? So at this point, they are already telling you that Fedora is not set in stone. If you want to see Debian as your final baseline for the recipes that are going to be built on top, do join and help push Debian in a constructive way. And by telling you constructive, don't just, bash into the room and raise your hand and say, I want to see Debian because Fedora is no good for me. That's kind of not constructive, right? Also, GitLab, Codebird, etc. is not a challenge. It could be changed in a matter of weeks, so they can move to wherever elsewhere, right? But Code Europa, EU, and GitLab OpenCode DE rely on GitLab software. This is why I have chosen GitLab to start it. And it is very important to note the word I in this sentence. The people who have to build EU OS know it already. The choice of the repository location is out of the scope of making the entire EU OS. It is not interesting at this stage. The real challenge of EU operating system is not picking a nice distribution. The challenge is to replace Active Directory. The challenge is to comply with all rules from GDPR to NIS2 to Cyber Resilience Act to national requirements such as SecNum Cloud /IT Grand Schultz. So far, I don't know how to set up full disk encryption. This is important. With second factor and make it work for 200 people without a huge administration team. I don't know how to device life cycle management. I don't know how to manage backups. Everything must be offline/local first, but cloud ready. So what you have take out of this entire statement that at the beginning, this person is hugely passionate about building this entire thing, about building the community around it, about gaining knowledgeable people who are going to contribute because he is not all knowing. And of course, everything that comes out of the free software community usually has a decent enough large team, right? If they are going to pitch it to the EU in general, right, to the end boss, right, like the last level boss in a video game, they have to make it good. They have to make it make sense. And what Mr. Robert has and what I don't have is he has inside knowledge on how things are supposed to work and what might pass and what might be completely irrelevant when they're going to pitch it towards someone above. So the other real challenge is to make this cheap to build. I'd love to have an EU OS CPU, but there is no funding right now. So we need to reuse as much as we can. If you want to help today, talk to the industry, sign this letter. So you can click this as well. Then choose a small sub problem from the spec page and do research on how this could be solved at scale. Okay, so the takeaway from this entire thing. I have actually been thinking about this very same idea for many years at this point. But simply, I have no resources, I have no contacts. I am really not a good person to start anything like this. I was merely hoping that someone else who has some actual power to do something like this would start it up. And there you have it. It is actually starting to happen. And at this point, I'm very grateful for Mr. Roberts to actually having enough passion to try to push this. And technically speaking, I am not very knowledgeable to help in some kind of a meaningful way. What I can do is I can provide a little bit of feedback. I can provide a little bit of coverage on this topic, and I can plead to you who are watching this video, if you are technically inclined and you care about something like EU operating system, maybe go ahead and attempt to help them out. The reason why I care about a topic such as this one is because I am a passionate free software user. I'm a passionate Linux user. And sometimes we free software evangelists and users lack a little bit of software support. And by software support, I mean there are a lot of proprietary software that is simply unavailable to us. And it's not that I want proprietary software to become available on Linux. It's just that sometimes we have no choice but to pick proprietary software because we need to do our jobs or we need to get, well, job done, right? And usually it spins around this topic. So, as a conclusion, what all this comes down to, if this project succeeds in being applied to the EU public sector, it is inevitably going to trickle down slowly to the end user, such as myself. There will be computers sold in stores pre-installed with the EUOS at one point in time, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, right? But eventually these things tend to trickle down, right? And there will be support in UEFI BIOSes for secure boot, for stuff like EUOS coming out of the box, right? And you will get more support from the software makers for the operating system that comes down bundled with computers that are going to be sold in the store shelves, right? And back to the end user, such as myself, no matter whether I use Arch Linux or Debian or Fedora or whatever else Linux operating system, right? I am going to get better software support because of projects like this, right? So it doesn't really matter whether you are going to choose to use the EU OS in the end on your computer, but you live in the EU, it might be in your best interest to support projects such as this, because as I said, the whole Linux ecosystem tends to roll around itself, right? Just take one example. For example, Steam Deck from Valve. It has been a huge push in the gaming on Linux. Primarily, companies who tend to make video games, they tend to focus on this device, right? But what this means for me is I get better support for video games on my own computer, which has nothing to do with Steam OS, right, with Steam Deck. And the reason for this is because Valve and the Steam Deck and companies who make video games tend to drive in circles around Proton and better compatibility, and everything gets trickled down to the end user. In this case, it is a gamer, right? So there you have it. This is it from me for today's video. I am a little bit hyped around this topic, I'm not gonna lie, and I'm going to be following along the lines of the development of this project. And well, see you in the next video.